Thanks, Kristen. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Hi, Dan and Sherry. Thanks for participating in this. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on Wolfden's proposal and tell you some of the reasons we're so worried about it. First and foremost, this is a proposal to put a mine in just about as bad a place as you could imagine putting a mine. This is a picture of Pleasant Lake, which is right next to the mine site. And this is a state heritage fish water, which means it's an outstanding brook trout fishery. And two things brook trout don't like are heavy metal pollution and acid pollution, both of which are risks from the type of mine that Wolfden is proposing. Next slide. So you can see sort of towards the upper right, a little green square that says Picket Mountain Mine. That's where Wolfden is proposing to put this mine. It's not very far from the Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument, and it's not very far from Baxter State Park. It's right in the headwaters of the West Branch Mattawamkeag River, and all of it is in critical habitat for endangered Atlantic salmon. So it's just not a good place for a mine it's a real threat to the traditional outdoor economy in this region and to Maine's brand. Next slide. This is just to give you a little bit more of a close-up of where the mine would go. You can see a pond above that red outlined area. That's Pleasant Lake, which again is a state heritage brook trout water. To the right of that, you can see Mud Lake, another state heritage brook trout water. And then there's another smaller pond below Mud Lake called Grass Pond, which is also state heritage brook trout water. These types of waters are special because not only because the fishing in them is really good, but because they haven't been stocked in a very long period of time. And in fact, Grass Pond hasn't been stocked at all. So these are wild fisheries and really high value, and relatively speaking for Maine, they're easy to access. So these are really important resources, both ecologically and in terms of recreational fishing and guiding. Next slide. This is a picture of Picket Mountain and Picket Mountain Pond. This is a beautiful area. I would encourage all of you to visit this area. It's really spectacular. It's a great place to go fishing and bird hunting and hiking. Next slide. And this is a picture of Pleasant Lake. And you can see that this is right near Mount Chase, which is a nice hike and not that far from Mount Katahdin. Picket Mountain is off the photo in this one, but you can see from the arrow about where that would be. Next slide. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about where this whole process is right now and conclude with a little advice about how we hope you can help us fight this proposal. This is a beautiful photo, by the way, from a beautiful photo from the summit of Mount Chase. It's a really nice place to go hiking. Those are Upper and Lower Shin Pond in the background. Also very well-known recreational water bodies in Maine. Wolfden has done this once before. In 2017, they bought this property and they came before the Land Use Planning Commission asking to rezone this land for mining in 2020. Their application was a disaster. the Land Use Planning Commission staff met with them countless times, tried to get them to clean up the application to make it comprehensible, and they did not succeed in doing that. And in a very unusual move, LUPC staff asked the commission to reject the rezoning petition without even holding a hearing. And this is the first time that I've ever heard of something like that happen. Wolf Den can't mine unless it gets this rezoning passed, because the land it owns is only zoned for very small scale development like camps or for forestry. And if they do get a rezoning from the Land Use Planning Commission, and we certainly hope that they won't and will work to see that they won't, they still have to get a permit from the Department of Environmental Protection, which is a much more difficult and detailed process than the rezoning. But quite frankly, we don't want it to get that far. This company has a very poor track record. They've never developed a mine. They've never even sold a property to someone else to develop a mine. They have lost about $41 million since the company was formed 15 or so years ago. They lost $400,000 in the first quarter of this year. They have very few staff, maybe 5 or 6 people, and yet they've told the Land Use Planning Commission that they are going to be the cleanest mine in the world. They've said they're going to use what's called reverse osmosis technology, and they'll be able to discharge wastewater at levels that are cleaner than the natural surface water and the natural groundwater in the area that they're in right now. And there is no mining company on planet Earth that we know of that can do that. No hard rock mining company of this type. Even really well-resourced companies with a lot of technical experience can't do that. And that's why Wolf Den has still not provided an example of a company anywhere that can do what they say they're going to do. And they've made this same claim again in their second application. The major change from the first time around is that they have decided to say that the processing facility for their ore will not go in the unorganized territories, and therefore the Land Use Planning Commission shouldn't worry about it. Don't consider it as part of this rezoning petition. That's for DEP to worry about later on. And that's really just a smoke and mirrors game. It's saying, don't look behind the curtain. That processing facility will still have to go in very close to where they would have the mine. It's going to have impacts on this region. And the processing facility is probably the most dangerous part of a mining operation, but the mining operation itself is a source of acid contamination and metal contamination. And either way, this is a bad proposal that will harm really valuable resources and a really treasured region of the state of Maine. So I would urge everyone, we still don't know when the hearing on this is going to be, but we have pushed for there to be a hearing in a central location like Bangor, so that all of the, at least a public listening session in a central location like Bangor, so that all of the process doesn't happen, way up close near Patton. It's likely that the technical part of the hearings, which happen during the day, will be up in that region. But we feel very strongly that this is a statewide issue, and there should be somewhere accessible for Maine people from all over the state to be able to get to a public comment period and make their feelings about this mine known. And as soon as we know the date and the location of where that listening session or multiple listening sessions will be, we will let you all know. And with that, I think I'm going to close, and I'm going to turn it over to Dan Cusniers from the Penobscot Indian Nation. Take it away, Dan.
Thank you, Nick. So thank you all for joining us to learn more about this project and what you can do to help stop it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Penobscot Indian Nation and our perspectives on the Wolfton mining project that's being proposed. Next slide. So to give you a little bit of background, this is just a map. Oh, shot ahead. To give you some perspective on where Penobscot Nation lands are. So the tribe has kind of three types of lands. We have the reservation, which is the Penobscot River, which starts in Old Town and continues on upstream. And so that's, very important, sacred waters that provide the lifeways to the Penobscot people and have since time immemorial. And we also, the tribe also has trust lands that are scattered around the state. And in particular, we have some trust lands that are located in close proximity to where the proposed mine is, and that we're concerned would be affected by it. The tribe also has some fee lands and are also in the process of trying to acquire additional land, some of which may be affected by the proposed mine. Next slide. So the proposed mine site is located, very close proximity to and threatens several tracts of very significant conservation land. So it's about 15 miles from Penobscot Nation's, what we refer to as our Mattagamon Trust Land. So this is in T6R8 wells. It also, and contained within that is Great Lake Mattagamon and Mountain Catcher Pond, which are both very important waters to the Penobscot Nation. It's also in very close proximity to Baxter State Park and the Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument. As Nick said, you really would have a hard time finding a worse place to put a mine. And one of the big concerns we have is it threatens both the Mattawamkeag River, the west branch of the Mattawamkeag, which ultimately goes into the Mattawamkeag, and then ultimately into the Penobscot River. And depending upon where the ore processing facility and some of the other things that have been carved out from the previous petition, that potentially those waters or that wastewater could end up going into the east branch of the Penobscot River, which the tribe would have very big concerns about. Next slide. So the west branch of the Mattawamkeag, just to give you a little background and kind of the water quality, it's that whole area is water quality class A, which is the second highest classification for Maine waters. It's designated as critical habitat for endangered species, sea-run Atlantic salmon. It's the west branch of the Mattawamkeag is really important for the success of the Penobscot River Restoration Project for Atlantic salmon and other sea-run and anadromous fish species. As Nick said, it's also state heritage wild brook trout habitat waters in that area. And these areas do not contain, a bunch of non-native exotic species. And I could basically say the same thing about the east branch of the Penobscot, except that is class AA waters. But similarly, it's really important for sea-run Atlantic salmon and restoration of them and other sea-run species. Next slide. Just 3 weeks or so, we were up in the area looking at the proposed mine site. And these are a couple of pictures of, this is Pleasant Lake, which Nick showed some pictures of before. Just a really beautiful place and really, very quiet, lots of critter tracks all around the area. And just we didn't get to fish it, but it looks like it would be a great place for fishing. And then also the slide or the picture to the right is grassy, just real beautiful classic brook trout water. Next slide. So I referenced the Penobscot River Restoration Project. This is a project that the Penobscot Nation was one of the key partners in, and it really was a huge success. So that involved removing in the Milford area, removing the Great Works Dam and the VZ Dam, and then also building a bypass channel on the Piscataquis River in the town of Howland. And so there's a lot of people, a lot of money that has been spent to restore these anadromous fish species back to some of their historic areas. And this project has been a huge success in doing so. Next slide. This just shows you kind of a before and after with the habitat that for a lot of these fish species, including salmon and eels and other species. And it shows you how, prior to those dams being removed, little or no tribal sustenance fishing of those species was occurring up and above those dams because the fish couldn't access that. And then on the right, you can see all the habitat that was opened up from the removal of those dams. And there's a bunch of work that since happened in the Penobscot watershed since those dams have been removed, including putting in a lot of natural fishways, removing lots of barriers, and just connectivity for fish to be able to get into their historic habitats. And so this project really puts a significant threat on all this hard work and money that's been spent to restore these important species. Next slide. This is just a few photos to show you some of the Atlantic salmon restoration efforts that are going on or have been going on. We've been working with collaborative stocking of Atlantic salmon fry with federal and state agencies in the East Branch of the Penobscot and Mattawamkeag rivers. There's a recent project that Maine DMR has been leading to raise and then release adult Atlantic salmon to the East Branch of the Penobscot River. We've been involved with some water quality and benthic productivity studies looking at the East Branch before and after these fish are released. NOAA just recently funded, I can't remember the exact amount, but I think it's around $3.5 million to the Penobscot Nation for doing flow studies and habitat restoration on the East Branch of the Penobscot River. So you can see there's just, a tremendous amount of work that's going into protecting these waters. Next slide. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Mattagamon or T6R8 area. So this is a photograph of Grand Lake Mattagamon looking south. On the right in the background, you can see Horse Mountain. And so that's contained within Baxter State Park. And this is just an incredibly important place for the Penobscot Nation. It's historically been used by the tribe for thousands of years. And next slide. So this area is one of the only deep cold water lakes that the tribe has on its lands. So it's really important for landlocked salmon and brook trout, both during the summertime and the wintertime. Lots of tribal members go up there to catch fish. It's an important area for harvesting moose and deer for sustenance. Lots of bald eagles and other important wildlife species there that are, culturally significant for the tribe. Next. And the tribe uses these lands, such as in the area of Mattagamon, for carrying out its cultural activities, for gathering materials such as birch bark and spruce and balsam, for making traditional birch bark canoes, and for collecting materials to use for basket making, for gathering wild and other wild foods. Next slide. So these are just some photos of, historical use and current use by the tribe. So gathering, mushrooms, fiddlehead ferns, medicinal plants. And so if this proposed mine happens, it threatens these uses. Next. And these are just some pictures of the Mattagamon area and the East Branch of the Penobscot River. And and then the other thing I wanted to talk about is, I've personally visited some really bad mining sites in Indian country, or affecting Indian country around in other parts of North America. So this here is a site at Bunker Hill, Idaho, that just devastated the area. So it destroyed over 166 river miles, all kinds of waste rock, soil, sediment, groundwater, surface water contaminated with all kinds of heavy metals. The contaminants are outside of just the river. They're up in the floodplain. They've had to re-engineer stream channels, remove tailings and materials, build huge impoundments and wastewater treatment facilities after the mine was closed, and in order to clean up the mess that was left. So the hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent, and there's still so much more that has to be done. So the cleanup began in 1983, and it's estimated will continue for decades. And the Coeur d'Alene, uses of resources used by the Coeur d'Alene tribe have been destroyed. Next. This is just some photos of the work of the site and work that's had to go on to try to repair the damages that occurred from that. So just kind of in summary, some of the big concerns that the tribe has. We have, threats to tribal members, use of natural resources for sustenance. And this isn't just recreational fishing. This is sustenance. This is what people rely upon, these fish and moose and wild plants for their well-being and for the continuation of their culture. The threat to restoration of Atlantic salmon and other sea-run fish species, the threats of the water quality of the Mattawamkeag, the East Branch, and then ultimately the whole Penobscot watershed, potential groundwater impacts, the change in the natural character of that area. As Nick mentioned, this is a really wild area, and it's an important one to protect. The failure of Wolfton to recognize the important resources and to demonstrate protection of those resources. They just kind of have this black box and say, oh, we're just gonna, we'll use, we're gonna use processing that nobody else is doing anywhere else in the world, and we're supposed to just, trust them, which we don't, because they haven't been able to demonstrate that. There's also the failure of Wolfton to just demonstrate that they have a capacity for bringing a project like this to completion and to run it successfully. And we just, Penobscot Nation is very concerned about being left with a legacy of mining catastrophes like we've seen elsewhere that plague Indian country. And we just can't allow that to happen here. Next. And thank you. And with that, we're going to pass it over to Sherry Venno.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Nick. Thank you for doing such a great job of teeing up all the concerns and the impacts that we might be facing with this dam. And thank you, NRCM, for being the strong advocate for resources, natural resources in the state of Maine, and the Penobscot Nation have always been an inspiration to the Houlton Band of Maliseet Indians in their restoration efforts on the Penobscot River. I'm lucky in that I can just say yes. Everything that Nick and Dan told you, we agree with. We have the same concerns. We have the same interests, culturally speaking, but we have a different, maybe place-based interest that I want to elaborate on. And I'm going to show you a lot more maps. I hope people like looking at maps, but I think they will map out, as it were, our concerns and how they relate to the tribe as a place-based community with deep roots in the area, and issues, modern day issues that we are trying to address. So Maliseet people, or the Houlton Band of Maliseet, are people of the Meduxnekeag River. There's a picture of our beautiful river that I took just a couple of days ago. It's actually taken a lot of work on the part of the band and our partners to get it to look like that. The riffles, the boulders that you see in the stream, those are actually structures that we put back into that stream. There are many legacy impacts in the Meduxnekeag that you'll see all over the state, but we are located in an area of Maine, in Aroostook County, where habitat is incredibly fragmented. The tribe settled in the Houlton area once it could no longer hunt, fish, and gather for a living, essentially, and needed to settle down and find a place where a living could be made, and that was Houlton, Maine. In the 1980s, as part of the settlement process, we gained some financial resources, trust funds, to start purchasing land, and so purchased land in the Houlton area. The map up on the top shows the very small land base that we have, and that's one of the realities we face as a indigenous tribe that needs land to practice its culture, to undertake its traditional practices of hunting, fishing, and gathering. So we are pretty far north. I think I should have mentioned in the earlier slide that we have a couple of overarching goals in our efforts to restore the Meduxnekeag, and that is eagles on our land, nesting on our land, and salmon spawning in our river. Those are two big overarching goals that that guide us in the activities that we take when we're working in the Meduxnekeag. You can get back to the second slide, Kristen, thank you. We are not in the Mattawamkeag watershed where the mine is. We are next door. If you look at the big watershed map, you can see that the Mattawamkeag is right next door to our west. In fact, we're kind of in a little nexus of watersheds. Just below us is the Scoodic St. Croix, where the Passamaquoddy territory lies, and north and east are more sub-basins of the larger Willistic St. John watershed. You see, we are a tribe that is located right next to the Canadian border, and our watershed is intersected by that political boundary. Next slide, please. So here's another map that helps explain or map out our concerns. So we are the closest community, even though it is outside our watershed, we are the closest community to the proposed location of the mine on Picket Mountain. You'll notice that Meduxnekeag and Mattawamkeag are both Wabanaki, have Wabanaki origins. They're not the initial names Wabanaki people gave those rivers, but they are their origins come from Wabanaki languages. Meduxnikeg means rocky at its mouth, for example. And we have citizens who fish in the Picket Mountain area. I took a quick poll recently, just in my office. I work in the Natural Resources Department, and our Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, his grandfather, when he was alive, spent time in the area hunting and fishing. Our water resources technician for the summer, our summer tech, he and his brothers and father fish and hunt in the same area. So we can't rely on our very small land base to provide opportunity for hunting, fishing, and gathering. We look to the surrounding area. And if you recall the fragmented nature of the Meduxnikeg watershed with all the potato ground up there, it's not a good place. Even in the watershed itself, there's not a lot of opportunity like what is presented further west in the Mattawamkeag. So we do spend time out there. Next slide, please. Here's another look, another way to show that. So this, I pulled this off Google Earth. You can see the fragmented nature of the area in and around and north of Houlton and east of Houlton. So we look to the west, where there is relatively much less fragmentation and much more opportunity to for our tribal citizens to practice their culture. We also look west to expand our land base. We have not been successful yet, but we are looking at land in the area so that not only can our members practice their traditions in the area, but they will have a base from which to do it, so they don't have to travel as far as they might otherwise, having to come back and forth to Houlton. So it is the area that we hope to expand to, specifically to provide that opportunity to our citizens. Next slide, please. So here's another aspect of the Houlton Band of Maliseet Indians. Our citizens are also part of the larger Maliseet Nation, or Wolastoqey. We are one of the 8 Wolastoqey Maliseet First Nations. This is the territory of the Wolastoqey, Wolastoqiyik, people of the beautiful flowing river. It's another image of that place-based nature of Maliseet, of Wabanaki. They are riverine people, a riverine tribe. And while we are separated from the other 7 Maliseet tribal governments, they are in Canada, New Brunswick and Quebec. We do have social and cultural ties and work with them to restore salmon. So because we have a small land base, we live very far from the coast, and there is a very large dam between us and the Bay of Fundy. We tend to think in large scales, and I hope this next map will demonstrate that. Next slide, please. So this is the Gulf of Maine watershed. There's the Penobscot watershed. There's the Willistic St. John watershed. There's the St. Croix Schoodic watershed of the Passamaquoddy. These are all important to salmon restoration. Salmon all used to swim up and down these rivers. They all thrived in these rivers. They all contributed to the life of the Gulf of Maine. They all contributed to the life of the North Atlantic. They all contributed to the life of the rivers in these watersheds. They all contributed to the life of Wabanaki. This is the Dawnland. These are the watersheds of the Wabanaki. when we work to restore a river, we're working to restore its watershed. We're working to restore the watersheds in Wabanaki territory, in the Dawnland. We're working to restore the Gulf of Maine. We're working to restore the North Atlantic. Anything that happens in these watersheds, like a mine, like removing a dam, like restoring habitat, they contribute to the larger restoration of the entire area. It's all connected. The watersheds, the Gulf of Maine, the North Atlantic. What affects salmon in the North Atlantic affects salmon in Penobscot, in the Willistic St. John. The same, you can say the same thing in reverse. Next slide, please. We first began thinking about how we might influence this impact. So Bald Mountain is in the Willistic St. John watershed. That's when we first started thinking about mining. And when we first started working with NRCM to ensure that whatever mining took place, whether it was at Bald Mountain or elsewhere, were held to high standards. This dam that is being proposed in Pickett Mountain, in the Mattawamkeag, will have the same impacts as the Bald Mountain might have had, ultimately in the larger life of Wabanaki territory. So when we came out of that process, we understood that there were going to be laws that would hold these proposals up for scrutiny and ensure that if mining happened, it would happen properly. The Wolfton is trying to get away without following the rules that are established. They're trying to circumvent those rules. Nick and Dan mentioned those concerns. Next slide, please. So, not only ourselves, but others see this mine as a test of those rules. Initially, Wolfton tried to narrow the scope of LUPC's review. They didn't get away with that. They're trying again, and they're trying again to circumvent the rules. They're trying to separate the processing plant from the mine to somehow get through what we supported and see as really strong and important protections, safeguards for Maine's environment, Wabanaki territory, salmon, Wabanaki people. So we hope that you will have the same concerns we have. I've talked a lot about Wabanaki. The impacts that are on our resources are the same impacts as on everyone's resources. We share these resources. They deserve to be protected. Wabanaki people deserve to be able to practice their traditions without having to be concerned about these kinds of impacts. We're already dealing with legacy impacts for hundreds of years. This is a new one. You don't have to go down this road. We can start going in a different direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. I think that was a great transition into what you can do and how you can be a part of this movement to protect Maine's Northwoods. The first that Nick shared is that you can attend and testify at the public hearing. Again, we don't have a date for that yet. We were expecting to soon. But as soon as we do, we will let folks know that date and time, and again, how to be there, how to testify. We'll make sure to share all that information. You also can submit comments to the Land Use Planning Commission now. And we will send out, we have an action alert set up that makes it really easy to do that. You can find it on our website, or we'll send it around to folks in an email tomorrow. We also know that we just need more people to be aware of this issue and to take action. And some great ways to spread the word are to write a letter to the editor, to your local newspaper, sharing your concerns about this project. We know decision makers often read that section of the paper, and they're super easy to write, just 150 to 200 words. And we're happy to provide guidance on how to do that if you'd like to reach out to us. And then just to share this info and these actions with others. If we are going to defeat this proposal, we need as many people showing opposition as possible. So share it with your family, share it with your friends, let them know about these actions and how they can get involved as well. And that brings us to some questions. I already see that we have questions coming in to the Q&A box. If my speakers want to come back on camera, we can start to ask some of those. And if you have them coming up, feel free to pop the questions in, and we'll get to as many as we can. And then hopefully, if we don't get to your question, we can follow up via email. But I'm going to start with this first one, which Sherry, you started to address, but I'm wondering if we can elaborate a little bit. David asked, within the past 5 to 6 years, Maine's mining regulations were made much more restrictive and protective of natural resources, which I think all of you are well aware since we all worked together to pass that mining law. They asked, what loopholes have Wolfton found? Why can't we just let these mining laws play out and protect us from this project?
You know, Kristen, I think Nick could probably address that question better, but my personal opinion is that rules are made by people and implemented by people, and people can make decisions that aren't consistent with the rules as written.
Nick,
Yeah,
do you have anything to add?
Sure. I would say that Wolfton has not found any loopholes at this point. I think they're working on one, which is this idea of bifurcating the processing plant and the mine, even though those two facilities are not realistically separable. You can't have a mine without a processing facility. You can't have a processing facility without a mine. So that's, but it's also important to remember that this is, we're still in the very early stages of this before the real test of our new mining law and rules, or our 2017 mining law and rules, would happen, because this is just the rezoning. It's not the permit itself, but it's still really important to make the case, because to make the case that Wolfton doesn't deserve this rezoning, because A, it's a bad place to put a mine, and the LUPC has responsibility to protect the unorganized territories for the whole state. And B, if you're going to get a rezoning that allows this type of development, that type of development has to be well planned. Wolfton saying that they are going to do something that they can't even point to another mine being able to do is not well planned development. It's a wing and a prayer. And that's not how we want to see this go forward.
Thanks, Nick. Dan, anything to add to that?
No, I think both Sherry and Nick covered that well. I think it's just, it kind of puts us in a situation of just trying to trust something that we don't have trust in, because so far the materials that they've put forth don't seem to suggest that they're capable of even meeting the lower bar for this, for the LURC or LUPC hurdle.
Great. Yeah, I think we've said a lot that this is the wrong company to operate a mine here. And we have a question here that sort of relates to that, asking, what metals are Wolfton proposing to mine? And what would you say to someone who says, well, we all need these metals and we shouldn't say not in my backyard. How would you respond to someone if that's what they were saying to you? Nick, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. They're proposing to mine for zinc. We are not suffering from a shortage of zinc. The United States has the largest zinc mine in the world. This is a very small deposit, so it would not be a significant source of zinc for our industries. And no matter where you put a mine, you're responsible for doing it right. And this company doesn't have the experience or the resources to do it right. And so, you know, we have to, as advocates and as citizens, we have to weigh the risks and benefits here. And the risks greatly outweigh the benefits, given how small a deposit it is. It's not particularly high quality, whatever Wolf Den says about it. Zinc is not in short supply. And one other thing about zinc is that we do a lousy job of recycling it. And, you know, we do a very good job recycling some metals like aluminum. We do a terrible job with zinc. We need to get better at it.
Great. We have two questions here that I'm going to combine. One is, does Governor Mills have a point of view on this? And if so, what is it? And then similarly, are there any local legislators that we have approached and are on our side or against us? And is it worthwhile for people to reach out to either their legislator or to Governor Mills? Dan, you want to take a crack at that one? Oh, you're on mute, sorry.
Yeah, to my knowledge, we don't know, you know, Governor Mills hasn't taken a position on this that I'm aware of. And as far as legislators, I don't know the answer to that. Nick, do you know? I thought NRCM might have a better feel for that.
So there was one legislator who was very supportive of this mine, and that was Chris Johansson. He was from Monticello, I think they pronounce it. I don't know whether it's Monticello or Monticello. Monticello. And he's not a legislator anymore. So I do think people should contact their legislators about this. Legislators are totally allowed to testify, and this is a statewide issue. One of the legislators who has weighed in on this issue the last time around is the former city manager for Augusta and now legislator for Augusta. His name is Bill Briggio, and he is passionate about fishing for brook trout and landlocked salmon in Mud Lake, Grass Pond, and Pleasant Lake. And so he is strongly opposed to this project and has written great letters to LUPC about it. I think folks should be perfectly comfortable reaching out to their own legislators wherever they are in the state and urging them to weigh in on this, because the Katahdin region is special to people throughout Maine. And we need people throughout Maine to tell LUPC to protect it.
Thanks, Nick. We've had a bunch of other questions about if this recording will be available and shareable, where people can get more information. And so I will be sending out a follow-up email tomorrow that will include a bunch of additional background information. So links to our website, link to the LUPC where you can see the proposal and submit comments, a link to this recording, some other fact sheets we have. So we'll get that out to you again tomorrow, and there will definitely be more background info. And if anything's not covered, we're always happy to answer questions as well. So feel free to reach out to us that way. Let's see, we have a couple of technical questions coming in about mining that I think we'll write down and might get back to you individually. One of the questions we have here is a good one. It says, what are the things that will most affect the LUPC decision? How important is public opinion, or is it going to be more of a decision-making process?
I don't think
technical decision-making process. I skipped that word.
Both of those things are important. And You know, I think that there's no question that we have to do well in the technical parts of the hearing. And we have a good team that's working on that. And I think we will do well. But there is no substitute for an overwhelming show of public opposition. And that will, without question, influence the LUPC. I think if Maine people show up to the hearing in the numbers that are reflective of how people, you know, feel about this proposal based on the number of opposition comments from the last time around, that it will be an overwhelming number of people who oppose the mine. But you have to show up. That's a lot of the battle in all of these things.
We have a question about more people who are opposed to the mine. So folks asking, has Trout Unlimited offered any support, or have any of the surrounding organized towns taken any action on the proposal?
Do you want me to take that again, Kristen?
Sure, yeah.
So Trout Unlimited actually doesn't have a main staff person right now, but their former staff person is a guy named Jeff Reardon, and he wrote a great letter about the problems that this mine would cause to the waters and the fisheries in the area. He now works for Atlantic Salmon Federation. I suspect that he will write an equally great letter about the threat of this mine to Atlantic salmon. There are many volunteer members of Trout Unlimited, and if you have connections to them, asking them to get the Maine Council to weigh in against this would be super helpful. And any of the local chapters that want to weigh in against this would also be really helpful.
And then any surrounding organized towns that have taken action on the proposal?
So unfortunately, there are a few surrounding organized towns that have taken action in support of the proposal. And then there was a tie in Mount Chase. And so Mount Chase did not take action in support of the proposal. So it's sort of a mixed bag on that one.
Great. Okay, well, we're pumping up, coming up on 8 o'clock, and I think that is most of our questions that have come in. Again, I see a few more technical questions, and I've written them down. We'll reach out to you via email to follow up. But I want to take a moment to thank our speakers for joining us tonight. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Nick. And thank all of you for showing up on Zoom and hearing us out. And I'm excited about these questions and interaction in the chat. And again, we'll follow up via email and are glad to have you with us. But I think that's all from me. Any last words from our speakers? Great. Have a good night, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.